when I'm afraid, it means that I doubt that I have the skills or competence to deal with what I'm dealing with. I mean, that's my words for it. Because when I do have the skills or I do have enough confidence, I don't have the fear.
Right.
I know how to do it.
Welcome to Warriors at Work. This is Jeannie Coomber, your guide and host. Warriors at Work is a place where everyone in the workplace can come together, gain insight, encouragement, tell stories, connect, and share wisdom. We are a place of like-minded people at different stages of life, all coming together with a shared interest of enlightening and inspiring one another. If you're interested in going from the predictable to the potent, and you want to find your warrior magic, step into the journey with us. Welcome to Warriors at Work.
Hi, it's Jeannie. Welcome to the Warriors at Work podcast. So when I think about this next conversation that you're going to listen to, claiming your whole self, it really all began when I first started talking with Whit, my dear friend and colleague, about fear. What really holds us back from bringing all of ourself to our interactions? And I was absolutely fascinated by his perspective. Not only was he a former executive at a large organization for a number of years, he's also a strategic executive coach in a lot of different organizations now. And he's also a very, very spiritual, open-minded, very, very loving, generous spirit. So he has such an interesting blend of professionalism, but also a lot of personal development. And we ended up talking a lot about compartmentalization, who we are for the sake of harmony when we're at work versus who we really want to be. And after just a lot of back and forth and Whit asking me some of the most incredible questions, we really landed on this idea of how do you claim your whole self. And Whit is an advisor and a strategic leadership coach. He is really passionate about building healthier, more adaptive, productive teams and cultures. And you're going to hear a lot of his personal storytelling, his experiences in organizations as a coach, but also as a senior leader. And you're going to hear a lot of his own personal humanity. So I hope this conversation lights something up in you.
All right. So thank you, everyone, for joining me here at the Warriors at Work podcast. I am thrilled to have Whit Raymond with me. He's a confidant. He's a mentor. He is somebody who I have gone to numerous times over the course of the last few years asking for advice and counsel. And I brought him into this conversation today as I was reflecting on the environment in the workplace, particularly over the last year. Just extraordinary circumstances, amazing behaviors, leadership, and capacity. But I also noticed that often we are compartmentalizing who we really are and recognizing there's a bit of an art and a science to how we navigate our careers. But what if we could integrate more of our personal selves with our professional selves? So the best person I could think of was to engage Whit. Whit is a deep thinker. He's a phenomenal question asker, if that is such an expression. He has so much wisdom. He was a former senior executive of a very large organization. He's a really successful leadership coach, and he's a dear friend. And he and I are going to have some conversation about this idea of claiming your whole self from both of our perspectives. So, Whit, so deeply grateful for you to be in this conversation with me.
Here, yeah. Thank you. It's great to be here.
So let's get into it, because you coined this phrase to me. Let's claim our whole self. Like, what the heck does that mean truly to Whit Raymond?
Okay. So you might as well get at it, right?
Yeah.
Look, when I think about whole self, and I think about watching people in the organization, or I watch myself and I think about the times when people are really there. And I'm going to use everyday language. Okay. I don't want to get into science and jargon. I really don't. But think about when a person is really there, they're in touch with their feelings, they have strong views, they're able to challenge, they're able to bend, they're able to be flexible. They also understand they all have their own buttons and their foibles, and they're there. And so for me, when I think about bringing whole self, it's not ideal. Because the nature of work, as you and I both know, and I want to get your take on this too, Jeannie, is that you have to have a certain amount of grit to survive in a corporation or an organization. It's just the way it is. And why? Because they have to get results. And we're there to do work. We're not there to go play, right? But play can be a way to get work done too. So you can think about it in different organizations as there. So I think about the importance, when I say play, the importance of fun. So I think wholeness to me, it has three components to it, and I'll just give them top line, then we can drill down if we want to. One is about the ability to connect with other people, your capacity or my capacity to be able to connect with people, which means heart, mind, and soul. Whether we're doing that in the office, behind closed doors, whether we're in a meeting, are we able to have the capacity to do that at the workplace? And so that's one. The second thing is the ability to connect with the work. And by that, I mean, what's the cause? What are we here to do, to get done? And I've got to care about that. So somehow who I am has got to connect with, this matters to me. That's my belief. I think that's important. So the more that people in organizations, I find when they can connect with what the work is about and they share that together and they're saying, we're going, that's when people start to show up more. Their humor shows up. They're more open to ideas. People park their egos. They don't have to worry about having airspace. They don't have to show that they're good. And yeah, they may learn a little bit, but pretty soon they start to realize, man, there are some people in this organization that have been completely shut down. But because of what we're doing, because of the work and the cause and the invitation that we created, all of a sudden these leaders start to appear. They could be assistants. They could be scientists. They could be, you don't know where they're going to come from, but they're there. So that's the second one. First is connecting with people. Second one is connecting with the work. And I have the third one for me that I just want to throw out here is about the ability to express myself. So there's other, work, and then there's self. And so for me, being whole has to do with the ability for me to be able to say, can I say what's important to me at this moment in this context that I think I need to stand by? It's my integrity. I want to be able to do that. And it becomes part, I say, expressing it. If I wrap all of that together, I say it's about an ability to advocate effectively for myself. So effectively means I've got to do this connection with reading where other people are and where I am. Because remember, everything happens in relationships. Everything. Therefore, my ability to connect with people and use the work to connect with, and for me to bring myself forward and say, look, I've got these abilities. I've got these questions. I hear you saying you want to go there, but can I challenge that? I have some other thoughts. And the ability for us to be able to have those kinds of conversations where you have a voice and you're not feeling like you're getting squashed all the time. And I'm not saying you don't get shut down sometimes. So, and can I give one example?
Yeah.
Just one. So I was saying that sometimes some of the people who are really, really tough, there's a very tough personalities and they're drivers and they're disconnected from but they're still good people. And one of the things that I notice about that, and I could think about one that I worked with who was like that. And it was really hard. And I realized that I was getting shut down, but so was everybody else. Yeah. And it wasn't all the time. When things were okay, business was doing well, performance was up, we could, there was a little bit more chill and we could do it. But boy, when we needed to get down to some stuff, sometimes it wasn't like that. It was very tough. And I remember saying, I need to have a conversation and saying, do you really want to know what people think? Do you want the best ideas coming from this? And I did it not in an attacking way. I'm saying this in emphasis with us here, but I had to ask what's permissible. I had another boss who was amazing. She just was a very strong manager for me because she was very good at protecting the assets, or the people, the goodness that was there. And I had to negotiate with her because one time I walked in and she was really she was on a rampage, and I had a conversation with her, and she caught herself. And she said, Whit, I really appreciate you doing this. And I said, let me tell you what it does to me. And I don't could tell you what it does to other people because I see these people. And she was fantastic. She took it in. And then she said, look, I'd like you to warn me, but don't do it in public. Fair, right? She said, I don't want to be humiliated. I said, you got a deal. I said, I'm here for us all, and I report to you. You're my boss and I respect you. And it really mattered a lot to me. And she really, really impressed the dickens out of me for doing that. So those are two examples about what is it being able to be whole, to be able to have those conversations.
I love that too, that you had a lot of courage to surface that and hold a mirror up on her to her behavior.
Yeah.
And the other manager that you were making reference to, when you said, do you want to know how what you're doing is having impact, or do you want to know what people are thinking? Were they receptive to that feedback?
Yes and no. So the words were yes, but I didn't get it.
Okay.
And I also realized that actually he was being honest. It was more circumstantial. When would it be okay? And when would it not be? The thing that's interesting is that I had to do all the work. And I did this also by listening to all my other colleagues, all my peers at the table. We would talk about what was okay, what was not okay. When can you do this? When can you not do that? So I was learning about that. But at the same time, there was circumstantial. So what happens is you start to realize, okay, it's now we're in situation A. And in this environment, you just need to button your lip, not do it now, find another time. If you really believe something, come back and do it later, like they call the meeting after the meeting or the meeting before the meeting, that kind of stuff. So I'd pick and choose. And I wasn't always effective, Jeannie, because,
So I hear two things from what you've shared so far. So first of all, I love others, work, self. I think it's really important to even ask yourself, or anybody that's listening or watching, where am I over-indexing? And how is that affecting the other two? Because all of us in times of stress will lean in one of those three areas. And just having awareness to where's balance? What does it look like when I've got alignment on all three? And I think the other thing that I'm hearing from this is this idea that I heard Marshall Goldsmith talk about, the executive coach that I think it's probably his most famous book was What Got You Here Won't Get You There. And he has this expression called mutual responsibility.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And what you have just characterized is an example of mutual responsibility. It's not something happening to me. It's me co-creating. It's me engaging in that relationship, engaging in that cause, recognizing too. And I know that this is not absolute. It's not going to apply in every circumstance because some organizations, that's not how they're set up. That's not the cultural cues. They're not interested in your point of view.
Right.
But if it's a leader-oriented business that is creating a culture, this is my take. If they're creating a culture that wants shared purpose, that is operating with a certain value system, and they're creating environments for co-creation and feedback, mutual responsibility is really important. And I really have noticed places, particularly over the last year, where when that is present, when there is that co-creation and there's a shared understanding that we all have a stake in this, the quality of the conversations go up, the quality of the relationships go up. And then what it does is it allows for more opportunity for you to show your true self, so and Jeannie, for you to bring your heart to that.
Yeah. So can you, just because you and I are, we do this same stuff, but what's some examples for you when you had that, when you saw that?
Me, when I saw which part?
When the over-indexing and the mutuality was there, or when it wasn't there?
Well, I think probably my biggest challenge in my life
Yeah.
professionally is I am a driver. I'm very ambitious. I
Yeah.
like to get things done. I'm a list person, and throughout my career, it has not always helped me. It's
Mm,
hurt my
mhm.
branding. People will call me intense. I had a few nicknames where I would leave sort of a sea of dead bodies because I was so focused on driving. I would miss a lot of the nuances of leading and bringing people along. I have a lot more awareness now because
Yeah.
of mutual responsibility. People have been honest with me, and I've created an environment where I want to know.
Yeah.
And I've
Yeah.
had some very poignant experiences where when I tend to over index there now,
Yeah.
it's usually some imbalance going on within me.
Uh-huh.
And sometimes
Such
it kicks.
as,
Well,
such
when
as.
I'm trying to protect
Yeah.
myself,
There you go.
I don't like what's happening.
Yeah.
This person's too much in their ego. They're driving towards a solution that I don't agree with. I will start to do things that will play too much into my, in the presence world, we call it competence cues. Like I have a hammer like nobody's business. I
Mhm.
can drop this smile
Right.
and go super serious. Like, you got to be kidding me. Like my North Jersey comes out. Anybody that's listening to this, North Jersey, I got a head bob. My parents are from the Bronx. Like I got a lot all right here, and it can go super serious. So I have a lot of awareness now that that is not necessarily the right approach. And going back to where am I imbalanced? What is that about? Is it I'm trying to win? Am I trying to drive something? Do I not respect this person?
Yeah.
So I've just fortunately been in places now, thank God to the people I surround myself that are honest with me to say, whoa, what was that? What are you
Yeah.
doing?
Yeah. But you have
So
to be open to be able to do that. See that when you talked about receptivity, that it's so on because I think if you're like a driver and I feel like you railroaded over me, I might say, hey, Jeannie, can we have a conversation? I just want to
yes.
understand, is this the way you want to be? What happens if I have something I want to bring up? What do we do?
Yes, so important. One of the other
Yeah.
things that we were talking about when we were preparing for this, he used a great expression, and you talked about what it means to be a member at work
Yeah.
and how you, in your professional career, you were not a conformist. So, can you say
Yes, it
more?
was.
No, you were definitely
No,
not.
so let me, yeah, this I know where you're going, which is what does it mean to be a nonconformist versus being a member, right?
Yeah,
So look, the reality is, and you and I both know this, is if I don't fit in or we don't fit in to some degree, minimal level, we're out. I
right.
mean, the host will get rid of the agent, the foreign agent, and that's called life. It happens, right? So the question becomes to be a nonconformist. It's not about me being a nonconformist. It's just that the way I am, like I have a different drum that I beat to. It's who I am. And it's not because I want to be different or try to, I have no care about that at all. What I do care about is what are we here to do? And can I have a conversation about it? Or if I'm feeling like everybody's being excluded or you're railroading through, do you want that? Because I don't. That's not the way I want to work.
Mm,
So yes, I want to be a member. I need to join. I have to be part of it. Every culture has its values. The questions are which ones are healthy and life-giving, which pull us up to higher functioning, and which of us squash us. And
mhm.
so ones that are squashing, I'm very sensitive to because I remember years ago, I was really struggling. And I remember I went and saw this, a therapist, sat down with him, and I told him that I'm too sensitive and all this stuff. And he looked at me and he said, Whit, did you ever consider that your sensitivity is actually an asset, as a gift? And I was like one of those dogs that are really smart. You talk to them and they go, huh? And it literally flipped me. I think what I thought was a problem became something. And so the reason bring that up is because when I think about working in an organization to be a member, yes, I do need to be a member. And I think diversity is bringing in difference. So we want conformity, to some degree, but we also want diversity. The richness of that is what allows us to do it. And people bring different things. They look different, they behave different, they have different backgrounds, different histories. And you say, well, we should all conform to be like a white male, right? Or do we want to just look like the power people, the people with power? I don't call them leaders. Let me be very clear. I want to make a distinction. There are leaders, and there are people in positions called leadership or executive, but they are not leaders. And very few of them that I personally have experienced, but they have power. And so when I'm in that, I'm asking myself, how far can I let myself out, which would be nonconformist, or just me being me, in a way that I can help me and us move forward? It's not just about me having my voice. That's very self-centered. It's really around wanting to figure out, look, I want to feel like I can talk. I want to raise questions. And I want you to be able to say, Whit, back off. I want you to be able to do that with me. But if we can't do that, then I'm going, well, what are the rules here? The rules are I just let you sit back and I go, yes, yes, yes. And then we drink the Kool-Aid and we pretend, and people do different things.
There's a couple of things though that you just said I want to unpack. And what you just said is, how much do I want to let myself out? I think that's a really important piece to this too, is it's to be an inquiry, is how much do I want to reveal here? But go back to the moment you said, I sat down in a therapist's office. I thought I was too sensitive. First of all, was that your own assessment, or did someone say that to you? Wait, you're too sensitive.
It was a voice I got. It was from my child. It was like,
okay. So then he got you to reframe that to say that's actually a compliment.
Yeah, I was saying it, and it was an echo of the past. I was what I call living in the past, because beliefs are based upon past. So I was living that out, and he was going, well, wait a minute, there's another way to look at that.
And then what was the moment where you started to really tune in to the cues of organizations where you were like, I actually can reveal more of myself. I do not need to be X, Y, Z, how they have predetermined. Like, when my brain immediately goes to, leadership competencies at each level. They say at the executive level, these are the competencies that you need to have. Mid-level, these are the competencies you need to have. And they will often measure your performance and your success based upon how you embody those competencies. So now when you put whole self as an overlay to this, what you're really talking about is in the essence of who I really am. How much am I willing to pull forward and bring into this experience? So what was happening in your career, in your life, that made you have this awareness to say, wait a second, there's some things here that I can reveal more of myself to?
Yeah.
Was it more your instincts?
No, it could be betrayal. It could be people throwing me under the bus. It could be people being nasty. It could be, I remember many years ago, I was a partner in a firm, and some crap started to happen, and I was part of it, and I had no idea. It was like, until one of the partners came up to me and said, Whit, what they just did to you, they threw you under the bus. And I was like, I was incredulous. I could not fathom that this could be the case. It was a huge wake up. We ended up having a meeting, the entire partnership, all 10 of us. And I said, I was hurt. I was angry. I was, and so they started to talk about it, but the way they did it was they were putting me on this hot seat. And I sat there, and this thing about being whole, it really isn't something you think about until there's a circumstance that brings it up. Otherwise, you're just doing your thing, right?
Yes.
So let's not make this like I'm walking around thinking, oh, can I be real? It is really at the moment where something is at a breaking point, and all of a sudden you go, whoa, what's going on here? And what I got really angry, because what I realized they were doing was what I called processing me and putting me into a bucket, but they weren't addressing the issue. And I said to them, I am really BS that this is what you're doing. You're talking about my emotions, but because I am angry, because I have been betrayed. and you are not dealing with the issue. And it literally like shut them down. They just did not know what to do with that. And at that point, I just got up and I just said, folks, this is not a place for me. I appreciate everything that we've done and everything. And I basically did my departure and I left.
Wow.
Because they were unwilling, incapable because there were other dynamics going on there. And I realized that in organizations, when there are people who become the scapegoat, and often it happens with a lot of non-white males, I'm going to be honest with you, it can happen where they become the scapegoat for what's going on. And what happens is that they get into a role where they're the screaming, frustrated person, and they get labeled that way. It's all very organic. And then they become ineffective. And then they get a reputation for that. So I could feel that happening to me in this particular group. And I realized there was nothing that I could do at that point, because there were alliances between them that were more important than their alliance with me. And I got it. And I just said, I'm not going to waste my time with this. It's just not the right place. Now, was that experience, that whole thing, working with that partnership, was one of the best experiences I've ever had. Genuinely, they're wonderful people. I've got calls afterwards. Every single one of them called to talk about it, so they were very caring people, and they did it, and they got it. They understood what was going on. So I think it's something that we have to look at the moment, or when we smell the circumstances. And then, as you go around other places, you just start to, first of all, I will tell you that part about reading other people is really, really important. When I think about power structures, when you watch people who report to somebody, that tells you more about the person who's in power than the person sometimes. So I can look at how people behave, the people who are in the middle of the organization, and their behavior tells me a lot, everything I need about it, what's up there. Then all I do is, if I see a senior person in 4 or 5 minutes, you get it. It's like you see where they are. And then the question becomes, what do you want to do with that? Is there any opening there? And I sometimes don't know. So I will literally kick the tires. I will try them out. And I do it just by asking questions. I try to engage them. And it's not always easy,
How do you think everything that we're talking about so far, particularly around those three ideas of other, the mission, the work, and the self, how do you think people are operating based upon that in this virtual environment? Because we don't get all the hallway time, the conference room time. How are you seeing people navigate that?
I think it depends on which industries are really doing well financially and performing well, and which ones are not. So the ones that are doing well, and a lot of them are in finance, but and I have a number of clients in finance, but I think they just try to work through the virtual environment as much as they can to make sure they've got the relationship. But it's hard. I mean, first of all, the hours are longer. They're working harder. So there is a serious burnout. And then the second thing, which most of us know about viewing this, that people have a difficulty with having the kind of connections that you have. You can't turn your chair and talk to somebody, where a lot of what I call intelligence shifts in the organization through those small calls. So that's missing. Although, and I think we're going through a huge transition. Obviously, we all know that. And I think what I see is they're getting better at it. They're getting better at finding ways to do the connection stuff. And, I just gave an example. You and I had run a conversation recently with a group about that, which is, what do you do in a virtual environment? And I say, I don't think it can be done. And you all go, wait a minute, let's look at this. It was great, because I do believe that in this environment, people are really struggling. And when you worry about your job security, at the same time, you're trying to learn how to work remotely, and you cannot have the same kind of bonding that you did before. You can still create it, but it's got to be different. People have to adapt to it. And the ones that I know that are struggling with it, they're just doing the best they can. So somehow they get execution done the best they can. But then what happens is you get people leaving because they're unhappy. They don't feel they have a voice, or they just feel like it's just one churning wheel all day long, and they get the screen freeze, right? They get worn out by it. So I don't know. What do you see? What do you see in that? I'm just curious.
Well, I'm seeing a lot of the same things, a level of creativity to create engagement and exchange using so much more of the technology, but allowing different types of conversations and meetings and being very transparent and explicit. And that was one of the things that we were talking about in our group, is being very explicit around what's the goal, what's the intention. Whereas when you're sitting in a conference room, there's a little bit more of like a warm up before you get to it. Whereas in the virtuals, you need to be much more explicit and attuned to how everyone is feeling and thinking and level of engagement and conversation. It's harder, no doubt, to do everything we're talking about. This idea of claiming your whole self is very hard, and figuring out, where can I reveal more of myself? Where do I have to button up? What are the cues and the political elements, especially for anybody watching or listening that's gone on to new organizations where you're having to do all of this stuff, figure out the mission, figure out the people on my team, figure out the relationships I have to build. It's a lot harder, but I find that playing with the clarity around, what are we here to do? What is the texture and experience going to be like in this interaction? Just surfacing all that and naming it, like much more courageous, transparent talk, which for some is really difficult. But to your point, everybody's having a different level of skill and experience around that. But it brings up something that I was thinking about when you were just sharing what you were sharing. You talked about, this is on Facebook Live on Monday, you talked about knowing, this is a part of the revealing who people really are, but it's more around cultures and organizations. You can tell the health of an organization by the level of sense of humor and spontaneity. And I think this plays through virtual or in person. So say more about that, because I thought that was brilliant how you just surfaced. I can tell right away.
Okay, well, let me put it back. I'll put it back as a question. When you are feeling spontaneous and you can be humorous and you can be light with people, how do you have to feel to be? How do you have to be in order to be like that? You got to feel safe. You got to feel like you're not worried about it. You feel connected with the people. You can use some humor. Now there is humor in corporations that is part of the game of be careful, so there is different types of humor. But anything that I think people are relaxed and easygoing, and they've got an ability, they feel the freedom to be able to quip somebody or quip themselves in front of somebody, but doing it with affection, but not at their expense, or making light of something, or they can say, hey, can I go off on a tangent for a minute? And if it allows, they can do that. So I just found that for me, those are good indicators of whether a place is what I call healthy. There's spontaneity, there's a free flow. And I have not found it wrong. I want to find where I see people who have humor and spontaneity, and that isn't a great culture. Now, the performance and productivity, you can work on that. That's another aspect, but at least that part's there.
And what I would add, there's a couple of things that I notice, and I've been seeing this a lot now with all of the level of Zoom calls, WebEx, Microsoft Teams, whatever, pick your poison. A lot of meetings now starting off where everyone's sharing something they're grateful for. Ending conversations with an ask, an offer, or an acknowledgement of something that might have been shared in that interaction that goes so far. I need help with, I want to offer something that I heard, or I want to acknowledge something that you brought to this conversation. Changing it up, which goes back to the first thing you said when we first started talking about, is the power of relationships. I think we have to challenge ourselves on even the language we're using. Why are we so heavy-handed with business vernacular all the friggin' time?
Yeah.
And I'm guilty of it too.
Really good point. Yeah.
Like I wish I had a jar where I'd throw a buck in every time I hear the word strategy, execution. What's another one that's, if I hear value-based. Okay, let's do some synonyms to some of these words. Let's get a little bit more creative.
Yeah.
Let's talk more about the language of people. I think those types of signals will open up people to claiming who they really are and seeing places where they'll feel more safety. They'll be willing to take a little bit more risk. And again, we're not suggesting anybody be reckless and start to dump all of this big personal emotional things, but challenge your inclination to compartmentalize yourself throughout the day. Where are those places where I can blend who I really am? I mean, this is so on point to what I've been talking about for the last year in this brand.
Yeah.
And it also prompts a question. Whit, you did a beautiful job on Monday where you were really just talking about the brass tacks. So a lot of people who watch this, we're list people. We like to write down, like, what are the things I have to action? And you gave some pretty tactical things. If anybody wants to say, how do I claim my whole self? What would you say that they need to start thinking about?
All right. So I'm going to reframe it. And is how do I bring more of myself to work?
Yeah. Okay? Love it.
Okay. Because it's directional and it's a principle to be whole self, right? So I would say there's inside work and there's outside work. Okay. So and if I'm not going where you're going, please just steer me. Okay.
Yeah.
But inside, one of them about that is being in touch with when I get triggered, positively and also negatively. When is it that I feel safe? When do I feel afraid? When do I feel like I'm worried about my status? My ego kicks in. And because those are indicators to me that something's going on that I have become vulnerable to. And so inside, what I do is I'll tell you, I have to back off and go back inside and get grounded with where the heck I am. Not to go and beat myself but just to go, okay, Whit, where's all this goodness? What's happening in you? What's triggering this that's happening outside? What are you noticing that's affecting you? Now, that's my inner work. On the outer thing, there's two, and we could have a whole conversation because the level of skill is really important. My ability to know how to have a conversation with people. And this comes up in coaching right now. I'm talking with a person who has to have a very tough conversation with somebody. And it's very tough. And the question becomes, can he build the rapport? And he gets into too much explaining. It's just the way he's wired. So we're talking about, how do you get curious about the other person? And that question we got yesterday with, go around asking people what matters to them. That is so honest, like being curious enough, caring enough to want to know. So externally, it's about being able to know how to have a conversation. And I think I always say, when I say negotiate, I use the word very lightly, but I mean, being able to ask people what's okay. What is it all right to do? And how far can I go? And I do it when there's a legitimate issue on the table, like there's been a meeting that's coming up. We're going after a direction. We're talking about timing or something such as that. And can you really speak up and say, I think we are way out there and we have an unrealistic goal and nobody wants to tell you that because they're afraid of what you'll do, right? So that's a negotiation skill. The other thing that's helpful is for me to find what I call a partner or an advisor, somebody that I can talk to and I know I can explain to them. So I'm talking about when I'm in a hostile environment, and I've been in hostile environments, to find the people who I can not just complain, because that doesn't do anything. That whole thing around triangulation, I have a conversation with somebody so that I know what I can do to position myself to come from strength and come from my basic goodness, not coming from my fear or worry about my status. So that is where, and then the other thing I say, is there somebody there that can call me out? You just mentioned this before, like when people said that you're a driver, right? And then do you have somebody that can speak to you and call you out? and you can rely on them.
Yeah.
So that's, to me, part of the external.
What you just said was really palpable, is when you're in a conversation with a partner or an advisor, is ask them to highlight, I want to come from my goodness. So here's what my approach is, or here's what I'm considering. So you're naming the place in which you see yourself at your best, when you're most aligned. And I think that's really important.
Yeah.
Is I also see lots of places is when we will start to galvanize our perspective, our point of view. We try to get a lot of soldiers lined up behind our stance because we feel like whatever, we want to drive towards something. But I think if we went back to, I want to come from a place that represents me, my team, and the business in the best possible way. How does this sound? I think that's really, really important, is coming from your goodness. I love that. So what
Can I add, may I just add one more piece to that, Jeannie? So I love what you just said. And it's, I also think about the power of when there's a difficult conversation that I want to have, or I had some kind of a breach with somebody, is for me to go to somebody that person trusts and say, hey, I want to have a conversation. Can you help me? Now, of course, people immediately go, well, I can't go talk to them because they're going to spill the beans. And,
Right.
Then you got to worry about boundary. No, it's got to be somebody that I trust, who has knows how that person I'm having difficulty with. If I can't reach him or her, then I go to somebody who they can. And then I might say, how would you approach this? Mm-hmm. So, because they might know something about them, and I'm following a particular path that really isn't the right way for this person. And if I came in a different way, it would be helpful.
I love that. I love that. So the inside and the external, like the triggers piece, I thought was really excellent. So here's my ending question for you, Whit.
Oh, we're done?
We are wrapping this puppy up.
Okay.
What's the one thing that you want people to walk away from this conversation and go, I want to think more about that, or ask themselves a question?
Somewhere in this process of our journey of what it is to be a human being on this planet, somewhere in all of that, the external and the internal collapse. There is no external. And all my studying, reflecting, and there's some great work out there, it's that we make it all up. And I'll tell you something, I don't want to say that as a platitude, but if you ever really slow down enough to observe how that is true, it will be mind-numbing. I'll give you an example. I read in a book that people are 99% tractors, and we fool ourselves into thinking we're conscious. And this person said, no, we're tractors. And I said, well, instead of me just disagreeing with it, what if he's true? What if this is true? And I was sitting on a plane, and I said, well, just watch yourself for a few minutes. Just observe yourself. I just sat there, I wasn't doing anything. And all of a sudden, I went like this, all these things were happening. I had no awareness. They just happened. And it was like I had a peak, a moment. I went, oh my God. Now, that's also true in relationships. Fear, uncertainty, risk. These are assessments that we make inside of ourselves. What is risky to me is not going to be to you, and vice versa, depending on the circumstances. So question is, I always say to myself, if I feel like I have a challenge ahead of me and I have fear, what Charles Jones told me about in this wonderful new book he's got out called Emotional Intelligence for the Stress-Free Leadership. And I recommend it to people.
Stress-free leadership?
Stress-free leadership. But what he says in there, he gets a different model about what emotions are. And he says, look, and it fits. He says, when I'm afraid, it means that I doubt that I have the skills or competence to deal with what I'm dealing with. I mean, that's my words for it. Because when I do have the skills, or I do have enough confidence, I don't have the fear.
Right.
I know how to do it through repetition, whatever. So if I were to say, what's one takeaway, is that it's not just that it's made up, is that how I understand and read my environment. I call it context because I think I'm inseparable from it. At the same time, the more that I can hold who I am in the face of whatever's going on out there without being perturbed and knocked off balance, that's wholeness. That's grounding. That's it. And so I will say we cannot get to that place of doing that when we're always busy doing.
Oh, it's brilliant.
And life is rushing along, filling our schedules. And I know that the poison, I have 10 things or values that I embody and work on every day. The number one is called pacing. And pacing is this. If I don't slow down enough to listen and be connected with what's going on, and I'm always into doing, I can never come from my strength. I will come from reactivity. I'll come from doing, and all my mind will go, and I do this a lot, but it's not my best self. So I need to make silence. And I loved way, for example, in a call yesterday, Jeannie, when you said, "What I need to do a moment," and you bowed your head to be with yourself for like 3 minutes. That's exactly what I'm talking about, is being able to make the space, the little moments, and read the environment, read what's going on, and notice what's happening, because I'm going to have a dance with it. And then the other part is, how do I make sure that I pay attention to those negative feelings that are old, that are getting triggered?
I love that. The pacing. And you tied it back beautifully together with, when you have pacing, you have awareness to around, how do I come from my goodness?
That's right.
And bring
It's like saying, if I want to cook in a house and I got to go into a room, I've got to go into the kitchen. And if I don't go in the kitchen, I'm not getting any meal. And I say there's a room in my house called where I slow down enough to be connected to myself. If I don't go into that room and make that space for myself, I go all the other rooms and do all my jobs and run around, fulfill all my responsibilities, and I'm going to be a mad nut. And what else? Time flies by. And they go, "Oh, no, I'm not good at this. I'm a student. I really am. I'm working at it. I have the guideposts. So now it's about doing it. It's no new ideas. We don't need them."
Love it. Well, Whit,
thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing this space and time and wisdom with all of us. So grateful for you.
Well, thank you very much. It's such an honor to do this with you, Jeannie. I love our conversations.
Thanks to everybody for listening to another episode of Warriors at Work and letting us be a part of your warrior journey. You can ask questions and make suggestions for future topics at jc@jeanniecoomber.com. Connect with me personally on LinkedIn and Instagram, and join us on the Warrior Conversations channel on YouTube and at the Warrior Magic Community page on Facebook. You can find links to all these places on my website, jeanniecoomber.com. And most importantly, be sure to tell friends about us, subscribe, rate, and review us on iTunes, Spreaker, and Spotify. It helps others find the show and puts more warrior magic out into the world.